Yeah, Steven Schinder. I'm the son. Dan's the dad of this team. We talk about Yes and Yes members, and sometimes two former and current Yes members. So, uh, yeah. So, Dad, why don't you introduce our guest here?
Yeah, yeah. Good. Yeah, a bit tired. My daughter was awake in the middle of the night, so she tends to wake up and insist that everybody else is awake. But yeah, I'm struggling. Coming up for 11. Doesn't. Yeah, yeah. I've got an 18-year-old son, or he's about to hit 18, which is frightening. So yeah, no, he's a good kid. He's a good kid.
Yeah, so back in May, Oliver, you took part in the Other Coronation Concert with family members involved, as we understand. Can you tell us about that experience and what you remember of the set list, perhaps?
Yeah. So that started because my we my son and daughter go to different schools, and we had always agreed that we would try and do a concert for the schools to raise some money for them. Because I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but in the UK, schools are always looking for money. They need things for equipment, for things for the children. And we sort of thought, what can we do to help? And we thought, well, we can probably do a concert. So it started off as an idea of just me playing a show in one of the halls and collecting some ticket money and doing stuff. And and then it sort of developed into, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we did it in one of the bigger school halls? And we sort of got to that point, and then lockdown kicked in, and then of course everything ground to a halt. And I was talking to Dad at one of his Christmas shows, and he said, "Well, I'll play, I'll do it with you." And so we went, "Okay, well maybe we can do it different." But then everything sort of stopped as the world stopped. And then as my son is now coming up for 18, he's just left school, about to go to university. And my wife said to me, "We're not going to be able to do it for one of the schools if he's left the school. So if we're going to do it, we have to do it now." So I said, "Okay." So I got in touch with Dad, and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it. They're still happy to do it." And he said, "But it would be good if it wasn't just me and you doing the whole show. It's a lot to rehearse, a lot to come pull together. When every show I do with Dad, it's essentially we turn up in the afternoon before the show, learn it, make it up on as we're going to go, and then do it." So he said it's going to be tricky to pull together 2 hours for that. He said, "Do you know any other people that could do it? Because then we can sort of split the show into 4 sections." And I sort of immediately thought of Gordon Giltrap and Carrie Martin, who's a singer that I've done some sessions for. She's got a lovely voice. And so they all sort of agreed to do it. And we were still aiming for a school hall. And then we were up at a local theatre, and we got talking to one of the directors there, and sort of suggested about it. And they said, "Well, we sort of, I think my wife slowly said, it'd be terrific if we could do it here, wouldn't it?" that sort of way. And they were really up for it. They said, "Yeah, we'd love to do it to help support the schools." And so suddenly we ended up with this 370, 380 seater theatre to fill up. And we put it on sale, and we sold it out in like 2, 3 weeks, something like that. They said to us before we booked it like 2 months in advance, and they said it's going to struggle to sell 2 months to go to sell out the show, and we did it really quickly. And the reason it got called the Other Coronation Concert is, I'm sure it hasn't escaped notice that over here we have a new king. And the only date that Dad had free was on the weekend of the coronation. And they always end up doing one of these concerts for the royalty people. And it was like, Dad said, "Oh, we should call it the Coronation Concert." And I said, they'll do a coronation concert. And I said, "Why we should call it the Other Coronation Concert." And so that's how it sort of came about. And then yeah, we just sort of pulled everything together and started working out sets. And I ended up sort of pulling the show together with my wife. We ended up organizing it together. So all the years on the road came in really useful of remembering all the things that everybody else used to have to do that I never used to have to worry about. And suddenly I'm there panicking, going, "Have we got enough pizzas for everybody?" It was a busy day though, because at the same time, because obviously Dad and I were getting together, we both got approached to be
Um, oh,
Hello.
we see you now. Yeah.
We're back. I have no idea what happened. Sorry. Ah, yes. And then I talked for a while to myself, and then thought I'm really paying attention, and then realized you hadn't blinked for quite a while. Yeah, no, we got approached to do a documentary film on the Strawbs, uh, and so they came and filmed us during the day as well, which made it really hectic trying to fit filming schedule in between. But it was good, really really busy day, and it was lovely, and it went down really well. And yeah, we sold up. We did a charity auction in the middle where we got so many nice raffle prizes from various musicians. All the guys from QEDG sent us loads of bits and pieces from Yes, and Steve Howe sent me some poster bits, and yeah, we got loads of stuff sent through. And we had this lovely raffle, and Rodney Matthews, the artist who isn't behind me, he's in the wall in my house. He donated one of his limited edition paintings for the front cover of his Trinity record, and that was auctioned and raised like £650 and stuff like that. So it was lovely. It was a really nice evening, and we ended up raising quite a lot of money for the two schools. So it was. Well, Gordon played some of his classic old 70s stuff because he's just virtuistic on the guitar. Dad did, because this was a shorter set, he did a lot of his really well known stuff and some of his lovely session stuff. So he did a beautiful version of Morning Has Broken and Life on Mars. So he did, the ones that everybody knows him for from the session world. And in my set, I threw in two or three pieces that I hadn't played before. One which was a commissioned piece of work for somebody who was actually in the audience. They'd asked me to write it for their granddaughter, and I hadn't played it, so I thought I'd play that. And I had a piece written for my daughter, which I played, and we played. I played a piece for my wife because I wanted to, because she was involved so much in the show, but she was one of the few people that actually wasn't on stage or visible. So I wanted to play a piece of music for her. And I also played. I got Carrie to come up and sing one vocal song with me, so she came up and sang "Glimmer of Light" from my Jab record, and I got my son to come up and play the second keyboard part. So that was quite nice. It was his first professional show, and it was with me, so it was quite nice for us to play together for the first time. So yeah, so a very memorable evening. And then I took Dad back to the hotel, and we met up the following day in the reception of the hotel, where they had a lovely, nice grand piano. We just had a bit of a chat, sitting around this and talked grand pianos for a couple of hours. It was really nice.
Right. So let us know if you can hear Dan now. Um,
It was, and everybody stayed afterwards, and loads of stuff to be signed, and it was just one of those nights where you do a show and it all just comes together, and it's one of those things where everybody's together for the right reasons. There's no no competitiveness, no who's your favorite, none of that. It was literally just everybody was there to thoroughly enjoy the night, and yeah, it went really well. So yeah, so I thoroughly enjoyed it.
right. Yeah, I still see comments saying that they can't hear Dan. So right. Yeah, but so you mentioned the Strawbs documentary. What was that like? And is there a release date specified for the Strawbs documentary?
No, I think they said they want to get it done by the end of the year. It was apparently, obviously the Strawbs are coming up for their very final show apparently.
Oh,
uh,
okay.
I haven't really been in touch with the Strawbs for a long time because it's been, oh gosh, 12, 13 years since I was in the band. So it's been a long time since I've sort of been in touch, but I keep in touch with them sporadically on email. But I got an email just saying that it was a South African filmmaker had become a real fan of the Strawbs, and he decided he wanted to do this documentary building up to the final show, and then sort of said, "Oh, it'd be really good to talk to all the other musicians that have been involved in the Strawbs." And Strawbs is a little bit like Yes in as much as it's had quite a few members over the years, and
Right.
so it
Just
was
a few.
just a few, yeah. So it was quite nice. So I just sat there and talked and sort of remembering all these different stories of when I was on tour with them, and that was lovely just to sit there and sort of reminisce and think to myself, this is great. I'm having a really lovely time reminiscing about these stories, and then sort of forgetting that possibly over the period of time I've sort of done the Wakeman elaboration to the stories of, and they've changed slightly, but they made sense in my head. They seem to be pretty accurate.
Okay.
It is slightly. If you can push it just a little bit to get a little bit of a better laugh, it will work.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone heard Dan's comment, but he said that sounded like it's very much in Wakeman tradition. So let us know if you heard him. Otherwise, uh, will we be fine if you do that? Or well, okay. I don't know how that works with like the OBS stuff, but well, okay. So you've Oliver, you've also contributed to a couple of recent books. So one of these is the forward for our friend Kevin Mulrine's Yes, the Tormato Story.
Mhm.
Last time we had you here, you talked about your fondness for that album. So did the words for this forward come seamlessly? What was that like?
Yeah, it did actually, because I think Kevin was he sort of said, would you, because he knew that Tomato was my sort of favorite Yes album. And I think he just sort of, would you do the forward? And I said, yeah, of course I would. And then I sort of thought, well, I don't want to sit and write a forward, which is I just like the songs and it makes me feel happy and delve into the songs, because I thought, well, that's what his book's going to be. So I thought I'd go right
Right.
to the beginning of when I was a child and how I first heard this music and how it became ingrained in my life. And I think that was a nice, quite a nice approach to take to doing the forward, rather than talking actually about any particular songs. It was more about how did the music become part of my life as a child, and how did it help me in this journey of all these different artists and bands that I found. And I think the bottom line as to why I like Tomato so much, it was probably one of the first records that I heard that was in that prog vein, that was slightly more accessible as to a teenager in the 80s.
Mm.
And so you are hearing things, almost in a completely fresh way without any baggage of previous expectations and stuff. And I think that's one of the, I've always said there's a disadvantage to musicians my age, as much as that we're too young to have actually been in the 70s when we probably would have actually been okay and actually had a really nice environment to promote our music. But the advantage that we had is that when we got to the 80s, suddenly we actually could find a band that we liked, and suddenly there were 8 or 9 fantastic records to find. It's almost like box set binging nowadays. It was like, in the 80s you could do that as a musician. You suddenly found, I discovered Deep Purple at the age of 13, and suddenly I could go out and buy Deep Purple in rock, Who Do You Think You Are, Come Taste the Band, Burn, all in one go, and go, this is amazing. I didn't have to wait. I was talking to my stepdad. My, step, my stepdad was a huge music fan, and he sort of said, we used to have to wait 8 months, 10 months, 12 months for the next record to come out. We didn't know whether it was going to be any good. And you've got the advantage, And he would, he always used to tell me really interesting stories, because he was a big music fan in his youth. And he always changed with the times. So when it got to the 80s, he was listening to 80s music, and I was the one going back and listening to 70s music. And he'd sort of come up to my room and just go, I've heard all this. Can't you listen to someone else? And it was quite good fun. But he did introduce me to lots of bands. Whenever I'd buy a record, and ask him to put it onto a tape for me so I could play it on my Walkman, he'd put another record on the back for me to discover. And so that's how I discovered a load of other music when I was growing up. So and he would tell me days about when I can't, I'll get the artists wrong, but he used to say he'd go out in an evening and see Chuck Berry, the Stones, and Pink Floyd all in the same evening, because it was in their early days of,
Yeah.
it's a fantastic time to live around London in that period. And he even went to a show and watched Yes play with Dad in the band with my mum in the audience. That's how that's how yeah.
Yeah, so Dan's gonna take care of something. Hopefully we'll be able to hear him, and y'all watching can let us know. But I see Total Mass Retain, Yes Tribute Band commented saying that's a great tale, and the forward was perfect. It gave an interesting historical context to the album for you, while the book focuses on how it all came about. That might be Joe Cass writing there, but yeah, it's a really great forward, Oliver. It's a nice little intro to that book and a book on an album that's kind of contested, I guess you could say. Like some people are like, why write a book on Tormato? But I think it's lovely what Kevin has done, like making a book covering all that.
Yeah, I remember he said to me, could you he gave me a number of words to write to, and being traditional prog musician, I made it longer. So
Yeah, that'll do it. Um, you were also one of many who contributed to the biography we recently reviewed, John Wetton, An Extraordinary Life. Many great contributions. And on that note, happy birthday to Lisa Wetton, whose birthday just passed. And your contribution, Oliver, was a wonderful recollection, one of many. It seemed like John was very easy to talk to, wasn't he?
he was.
I
We
know
really
we're good
bonded.
now, by the way.
Okay, people, let us know if you hear Dan. But yeah, Oliver, you were talking about John Wetton.
Yeah, John and I. It's a very weird thing. Many, many, many years ago, I was approached about being a possible keyboard player for him, and I think it was I can't remember who ended up working with him a lot, but it was when he was sort of working with solo stuff when he'd left Asia, and nothing ever happened from it. So I never got to meet him or anything. But I was just a fan. I mean, I was an Asia fan growing up. I have the Asia records all up there on my wall, and I've got the box sets and all manner of things. And I always thought he was an amazing songwriter, and
Yeah.
he had. I'll get to how it was when we sort of used to talk, but as learning my craft as songwriter, not just as a piano or keyboard player, but as a songwriter person, he was the person that always made me go, that verse isn't good enough. A
Mm,
verse has to be as
interesting.
strong as the chorus, or it has to lead the story to the chorus, because he had this amazing melodic ability to, you listen to Only Time Will Tell or Souls. It's all great. All the melodies are fantastic. And you don't just go, oh, I remember the chorus. You can sit there and almost hum the whole tune like a melody.
Yeah.
And I sort of thought, that's how I want to write. And another band that were like, there were Styx. There were a few bands, but John Wetton in particular, I remember with his voice as well, he just had the ability to do that. And I thought to myself, okay, I mean, I've got everything right in my career, but I would go, that's one thing that I've always tried to do, that John influenced me to do, which was always make sure that you don't just go, it's a good chorus. We'll do something to get there. And then
Yeah.
and so he always encouraged me that way. But he did that without knowing me. That was just my take on getting his music. And then when we were there was a Yes Asia tour, and obviously John was teetotal, didn't drink, didn't go to the bars or anything like that. And because I don't drink either, well, very, very rarely. And what would happen was I was quite an early riser. And so I'd often get up and go down for breakfast early, and John would be up early because he wasn't out after the show, staying up late. And we were often ending up breakfasting together, and we just end up sort of chatting and talking about everything. And he just gave me so much advice, and was just he was such an easy person to talk to. And when he when I left, yes, he was one of the few people that well, he wasn't one of the few, quite a lot of people contacted me, but he was really understanding and really, you know, a really nice voice to talk to, you know. And he gave me a lot of time. And then when I then started working with Gordon Giltrap, we were doing a tour, and he lived on the route of the tour, and I just wrote to him and said, "Oh, just to let you know, I'm in your neck of the woods today. So if you're around and you fancy a quick cup of coffee," he was like, "Yeah, I'll come along to the show." And I said, "Well, okay, great." And he said, "You want me to sing anything, do you?" And it was like, "Yeah." So I got the band together early, and we learned Heat of the Moment, and he got up and played Heat of the Moment with us, and it was great. And it was just, he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I loved about John. He was quite happy if you were his mate to come and just help out and have fun and hang out and chat and do stuff. And that he was just a very giving person, I think, and that's what I really, really liked about him. And
the biggest thing I got out of the book was just his almost overwhelming sense of humility you got about how he was, you know, which is refreshing.
Yeah, and I genuinely used to sit and watch when we were on that tour. In fact, I've got his signature on that poster there, because that was a one that they did at the Westbury Live Nation show, which was with
nice.
And there were only, I think, about 10 of those, and I got everybody to sign it. So I've got Alan, Chris, and John Wetton as well. So it's one of my little prized possessions from the tours, that poster. Yeah. And I would genuinely sit and watch them most nights on the tour, unless there was a scheduling thing where I couldn't get to the venue. But most nights I would sit there and watch Asia and just sit watching John, and just his voice was just so good.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Nice. Through the years, you know, even from his younger years to as he started to get older, his voice was always so good. And I believe such an underrated bass player. You know, everyone knows him for his songwriting, of course, and his singing, but as a bass player, he was just so, what a foundation and a heavy bottom end. He just rocked no matter what he played.
No, he was great. And it's a little bit like the Alan and Chris scenario, is that they're people that were my heroes growing up. But I didn't, even though everybody assumes that everybody from Yes used to come around to our house for tea, and we'd sit down making tofu burgers and stuff together. It just didn't happen like that. The relationships that I built with Steve, Chris, Alan were indirectly through Dad. They weren't actually because, they used to hang around our house all the time. Because by the time I got to 5 or 6, my mum and Dad were divorced, and Dad had been in and out of Yes, I don't know, 12 times by then.
Right.
So I had this wonderful advantage of meeting them when they were maturer people,
right,
of music, and they didn't have to try and prove themselves. But I also had the disadvantage of that they were older people, and so the time that I had with them was always going to be less than I would love. That's always quite sad when when they've all passed, and you sort of count them as friends, and you spend a lot of time together on the road, and you spend a lot of time sharing experiences, and you really are, as any musician watching, when it's a really high functioning, high performing team when you're in a band, where you rely on the other person to give you the foundation to do your bit, and you can only look good if everybody else is doing their bit to help you look good, and then you in return do your bit to make them look good, and you all work together to do that. And so you end up, you get this sort of, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you do get a bit of a family feeling, and that feeling with these people, regardless of all the ups and downs that you go through, you do get that, because you are trusting people every night practically.
Yeah, and speaking of some of those people and date milestones, yesterday was half of Stephen's lifetime ago that we saw you with the Yes Asia tour. That was in Las Vegas, Steve?
Yeah, at the Thomas and Mack Center.
Right, at the Thomas and Mack Center. There's a funny story that goes with that Steve claims not to remember. And that's that I went up to use the restroom, and in between bands, because I don't get up during a show, especially during a drum solo. If someone does that, unfriend them on social media. But anyways, my wife says that Stephen at 14 said to her while I was gone, "So are you going to marry my dad?" Because we weren't married yet. And so that there's sort of that milestone that she remembers from that show. But we also had Lisa Wetton's birthday yesterday. We had the
Yeah.
passing of Chris Squire's date the other day. We had Alan's birthday, June 14th, and Alan's passing back in May. So, would you mind sharing one of your favorite stories of Chris and Alan, either separate or together? I'd love to hear maybe one of your funniest memories of Chris, because we know he had a great sense of humor. Is there something you'd like to share with us from each of them, experiences you had with each of them?
Oh, it's kind of I mean, Alan, I'll go to Alan first while my brain goes back and sorts stuff through.
Yeah.
But Alan was I did the tribute video, which people will find on YouTube, where I talk about some of the things that Alan and I did. But the thing I'll always remember with Alan is sound checks, because I think it's quite well known that some of the guys in Yes weren't massive sound check fans and didn't always turn up on time for those sort of things.
Right.
But Alan always just loved playing the drums. So he would just go there and play drums. And I was always quite fastidious about going and checking keyboards to make sure they work, because obviously had quite a few keyboards. They were all on different wiring settings, so that if we lost power, we didn't lose power everywhere. So we would actually have to make sure each bank worked separately, and then each bank had its backup sounds to make sure that if a keyboard went or something went wrong, there was always another keyboard with a patch ready to back up the one that was missing. Mm-hmm. And all I would have to do is remember to change my choreography. So instead of going, "Oh, I'm going here now," I'd have to suddenly think, "Oh, I'm going there," but then this hand has to go here instead, because that's changed. So you have this, that happened to me in South America when a Moog got stolen. That was really quite a difficult day. But so I would always go to sound checks as well to go and check all this stuff out. And Alan was all there, and we'd always do our sound check, and then we'd just end up jamming for ages and just look at each other, and he'd do something and I'd come up with a little riff, and I've got a whole CD that somebody just recorded once of just us at a sound
I was going to
check.
ask you that. Yeah.
And it's just every now and then I just go through it and put it on for a bit and just enjoy. And it's some of it's a load of rubbish. It's just us mucking around and just, coming up with ideas. But some of the stuff from those sound checks ended up becoming some of the stuff on Fly From Here. The 5/4 chorus bit in Into the Storm, which I wrote, came from one of those jam sessions.
Wow.
So I always remember that with Alan. It was always it was just good fun. And he was so the word I'm going to, because unassuming is the wrong word, because he was obviously a larger than life character.
Yeah.
But you sort of, he made it easy to think of him as Alan rather than this huge rock and roll legacy type person that, I mean, I'm a huge Beatles fan. I'm constantly looking at your Beatles picture behind you, trying to work out what album it is, because it's on an angle and I can't see, but I can see the Sgt. Pepper costumes in it. And I'm sort of going, this is the Alan and White that I watched in the Imagine film in the background,
Is that crazy?
I can't quite get my head around it. I was listening to something the other day, because my daughter is into the Beatles like crazy. She wants Sgt. Pepper's over and over again. And then I'm sort of, in my head, it's like, yeah, and then Alan did this.
Yeah.
I find it really hard to sort of think, oh yeah, I played with Alan for years. He also played on Imagine.
It's crazy. The picture right there, where is it? Right there, Oliver. That's me with Alan, with Steve's older brother, who's 4.5 years older, and Alex was 2 weeks old. And Alan, for a long time, lived in Southern California in the West San Fernando Valley, where I grew up. And he lived around the corner from my parents, basically. And I did not grow up in a well-to-do area. It wasn't a poor area, but it was nothing special. And Alan lived there through the 90125 years and beyond. And became friends with him. And when I showed up that day to show off Alex, he answered the door in Speedos and a scuba tank. And it was June. And I said, you know, in America, Halloween is in October. I don't know what this is. And he laughed and he said, no, no, my neighbor's drain in their pool, there's something wrong with it. I'm going to go down and see if I can fix it. Like that was just, again, when we talk about humility versus the larger than life that most people know, people like John and Alan that's how he was.
Yeah. And I think those are the things that I remember most. And, you know, just hanging out. We spent quite a bit of time in, well, obviously Seattle, when we played in Seattle. Obviously, I think it might be known that I'm a huge Frasier fan, but I was also Cheers was a bit earlier for me, but I was one of the kids in England because we didn't get Cheers very often. It was only on we only had 4 channels when I was growing up. And it was on one of the channels at 11 o'clock at night. And the only way you could get it was by having an aerial plugged into an old black and white television hanging out of the window. And I used to try and get it so I could watch an episode of Cheers. And I now have every episode recorded on my TV in the house, which I'm slowly working my way through for all the ones I've missed over the years. But when we went to play in Seattle, Alan knew that I was a big Cheers fan. And we spent a day and he took me around all the landmarks. We got in a cab and he took me to the Cheers bar and we went to the Cheers, you know, recreated bar on the seafront.
Yeah.
Hung out there and he haggled with the waitress and got me a Cheers staff member top from the thing. It's things like that that I remember. Not, hey, we played this huge, great venue and you know, it's more those sort of fun things that you do together that are just unusual, that stick in your mind. And I think when we went to this Cheers place, they had a day where they had Tom, I can't remember the name, Tom Babson, I think played Tom the lawyer in Cheers.
Yeah,
was in the bar at the same time. So I've got a lovely photograph of me and Alan with Tom, so one of the Cheers cast as well.
Nice.
So those sort of things stay with me.
That's great. Do you have a funny Chris story you want to share?
I've got a load of funny Chris stories. Whether I could share them or not is
we could put the family show filter away for a moment. I think we're good with that.
I think I always remember about Chris is I spent a lot of time with Chris, and obviously I got on very well with Scotty, his wife, and we spent a lot of time together as 3. I'd always go and eat meals with them and hang out. And Chris was really the person I didn't know. I didn't really know Alan and Chris when I joined the band. I knew Steve because of the work we'd done on each other's albums for years, and he'd lived close to me in Devon. So we'd often meet up and chat and do stuff. And the first time I met Chris was we met up in a restaurant in London, and we spent a lot of time talking about the fact that we both had the same phone. So I immediately knew we had a technology sort of connection.
Yeah.
And then when we ended up in Canada, is when we first met, I sort of started to see that the Chris that everybody sort of talked about is like we only had 2 weeks to rehearse, and it was a 3.5 hour set. And you know, it was like I was like, okay, so what we start at 8 in the morning, do we go through till 5? Just, you know, we got a lot of stuff to learn here. Benoit and I are new. You haven't got John, you haven't got Dad, we've got all this new keyboard rig, we've got everything sorted out. And Chris would saunter in like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and be done by 5. And you know, I think we'll have Thursday off. it was all that. So I'd end up going in like really early and just playing along to stuff to try and learn it as quick as I could. But I always remember the 2 things I always remember: his memory. His memory was astounding.
Oh, really?
And when we were learning Siberian Khatri, because one of the things that they wanted to do on that tour was they said, how are we going to approach this with you and Benoit? And we sort of talked about it, and they said, what are you going to do for the solos in these places? And I sort of said, well, for years, every new keyboard player that's come into Yes has taken the solos and done their own thing. And I said, but I sort of think the solos have become such an ingrained part of the music that I don't feel I've got the right to go in and change them. So Dad had been changing his solo for years and doing different ones. And I sort of thought, well, what can I do? And I thought, well, I'll go back to the original records and learn like the And You and I solo exactly as it was done at the time, which is quite an unusual solo. And, you know, you can't get everything exactly right, but you get it as close to the essence of the solo as much as you can. And I remember doing all that. And that was lovely because that means we ended up playing a really nice sort of version of the music. And but Chris came up to me once when we were doing Siberian Gatru, and he said, "Can you put the string? You're missing a whole string part." And I said, "I don't think I am, Chris. I've got everything noted out and tabbed out here. Everything's there." And I went through it with him, and he went, No, there's this bit. And he sang this bit to me, and I went, "I haven't heard that before." And he said, "Well, all right, well, let's get the record then." So we got the record out, and it wasn't there. Oh. And he said, "Well, I remember in the studio we put it down. We obviously just didn't include it in the mix." I was like, "All right." He said, "Can you work it out anyway?" And he said, "Can you work it out and put it in anyway?" And I said, "Chris, I wasn't born." How?
It's funny that he remembered something not from hearing it over and over, but he remembered it having been done, and that was it.
Yeah, and that was it. And then so between us, we sat down. And he said it sort of went like this, and we sort of ended up working it out and putting it in places, and then it got adjusted and amended. But that was always something I really remembered about his memory was just phenomenal. And
other than what time to show up.
Yeah, we had a couple of those. But the other one I remember is when we were working on his track Aliens, where we just spent a lot of time together just at the piano because he had a very specific way that he wanted the piece to go.
Oh yeah, the song that ended up being a Squacket song with his project with Steve Hackett. Yeah. So
that was something that we spent quite a lot of time with, and that was right in the early times of the tour. And I remember when we were rehearsing, like I said, we only had 2 weeks or so to do everything before first show, and the first show was like 3.5 hours long. We'd learned 3.5 hours material, and so we only had 2 weeks. And then in the second week, on the first day, he said, "I want to put in a new song." I was like, "Okay, I'm sort of slightly full, but okay, if you want to." And then but because Steve wasn't involved in the song, he wanted it to be piano focused, and it was like one of those really weird moments where you're sort of desperate to be involved and do the best you can, but not get another song pushed out of your head trying to learn.
Right, because there's only so much space in there in that short a time to get stuff together.
Yeah, and so I was sort of, but it was one of those sort of things. It's like there's absolutely no way I'm going to say no, Chris. We haven't got time to do that. It was like. Right. Well, yeah, fine. Let's go and sit at a piano. I mean, that was just such a nice thing. So we spent quite a lot of time going through that, and he'd be going, "No, it's got to go da da da" at that point. And I'm like, "Well, you sure? What about this?" And he was like, "Well, can we maybe first time and we do it this way around second time?" And so it was those things I remember in particular, which again is not the sort of big rock band standing on stage type things. It's the little moments, the intimacies that you share where you just work together as people and musicians trying to come up. And we did the same when before Trevor Horn got involved in Fly From Here. We'd spend a lot of time going through arrangements of things and working out backing vocals together and stuff like that. And he was also really I'll say this for all the guys, they were always all really generous musicians. It's one of the wonderfully collaborative things about being in Yes is it was as long as you bring your best stuff, everybody's prepared to help and make it the best it can be. And he would sit there and we were working on Into the Storm, and he was absolutely adamant that Benoit was going to write some lyrics. And Benoit was like, "Chris, I don't write lyrics. I don't write music." And Chris says, "Yes, you can." And he's like, "I really can't." He said, "Drink a bottle of Jack Daniels, sit down with a pen, write some lyrics." And he was like, "No." And so we ended up sitting in the studio, the three of us, and Benoit came in with that lovely line. I mean, I haven't listened to Into the Storm much because they took all my keyboard parts off. But that part that Benoit sings, "An Army of Angels," came up from Chris, myself, and Benoit sitting in the studio, and the music behind it was the bit that Alan and I wrote. So I always have that really in my head.
Yeah.
And the whole second half, that's the other thing that Benoit always sort of said when I'd left the band and they were arranging Into the Storm, and they did that line at the end, da, 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 that whole melodic line for the last 2 or 3 minutes. Steve was playing it on guitar, and Benoit, bless him, went up to Steve and said, you do remember that Oliver wrote that whole section, don't you? And they were like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was quite nice to sort of just that familiarity you get with musicians where you've sort of got each other's back over the years. And it was quite nice. So Into the Storm sort of has sort of mixed memory for me, as much as I have so many fond memories of all the bits that were written for it and where they came from, with the downside that I didn't actually end up on it.
That's awesome. Love it. Thanks for sharing those stories. I want to, Steve, I'm going to skip somewhere
Okay.
else. We have a question.
Am I answering 12 questions in one, or answering one question for an hour and a half?
Yeah, you actually like went over a couple things we were planning on going to, so this is going really well.
Yeah, here's something we've always wanted to ask you. It's a two-part question. One, what are your thoughts? And this isn't, I hope it doesn't come off this way. This is not intended to be like an I gotcha question at all, but
Okay.
just very curious. Patrick Moraz has such a legacy with Yes, even though he only recorded one album with them. And for a lot of people who are fans of the whole 70s era, a lot of people, that album resonates with them so much. And coincidentally, when Steve and I did something on one of Roger Dean's birthdays, it was the most voted for Yes album cover and overall album cover, which is really interesting. Do you have any thoughts on, and you don't have to be nice about it if you don't like something, you don't like something, but we've always wondered your thoughts of Patrick's playing, and is he really your father?
Oh my god.
Just kidding about the last part.
No, he's I mean, obviously he's a phenomenal player, and his work on the record is amazing, and he stepped into a difficult position. But for me growing up, it was always slightly a bit of a weird one, because it was the one that Dad wasn't on, and then obviously going for the one was a bit more accessible for me at my age.
Right.
And then obviously I got into Tormato.
And most people, quite frankly, that went from, the way he influenced the band and just his own sounds was so much more superlative or esoteric, that it's like that stands out so differently, I think, than most Yes albums would stand out from any others, I think. Would you agree?
No, I do. And I mean, when you just mentioned the cover there, it was the cover that I always thought was possibly one of my favorite Yes covers as well, because it is just a beautiful Roger painting as well. It's particularly stunning.
Yeah.
Everything about it is stunning. But it's not an album. I'll be honest, it's not an album I'd pick out and put on a lot. A bit like Tales, I've sort of listened to it, but I don't have Dad's aversion to it, but I don't. It's not one I would probably put on
just for the hell to have some background music while you're cooking or something. Yeah.
Yeah, if I was going to put some Yes stuff on it, it's probably be, what would I pick? Depends what sort of mood I'm in, I suppose, really, whether I was in a Trevor mood or a Steve mood, I think.
What's your favorite what's your favorite, maybe not so standout Yes work? Do you know what I mean? Something that's not maybe as obvious that most people go, oh yeah, everyone likes that. Do you have something like that, like a deep cut that's one of your favorites?
Holy Lamb.
Oh, Holy Lamb! Wow,
Right.
that's one of Steve's absolute favorites. Yeah.
I love Holy Lamb.
Yeah, we talked last year about how that was almost in the Close to the Edge and Back tour set list, and I actually had another question about that set list. I seem to remember Adventure was being considered for the In the Present tour.
We even rehearsed it. We rehearsed it in Canada back in.
Oh yeah.
2008. Yeah, we rehearsed it. It just didn't go into the set. I can't remember why. I think something about it just didn't quite gel as well as it should have done, I think, compared to some of the other stuff.
Was that also being considered for Close to the Edge and Back when John Anderson was still slated to do the tour, or just for In the Present?
Just for In the Present, I think. I think they're Close to the Edge and Back. I suggested Holy Lamb for Close to the Edge and Back.
Right.
John wanted to do that, just piano and voice, which I was sort of really disappointed we never got to do, because I think that would have been lovely.
Yeah, I would have loved that.
And John had a couple of new tracks that he had lined up for that tour as well, which I still have on a CD somewhere, which were lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, which were lovely pieces. I'm just trying to remember what else we had lined up. It was a long time ago.
Right.
can't remember what else was earmarked for that tour. There's a lot of the classics that you would expect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Home definitely one.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm gonna read a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just trying to think of another odd one, which is probably slightly off the wall again, which is probably the Vultures in the City track I always enjoyed, which I know is
by ABWH. That would have been a really deep cut.
Oh wow, yeah.
I always thought that was a particularly good track that was sort of lost a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like if I were to like if there were more room on that album, if I were to slot it somewhere, I think I would put it maybe before or after Birthright. I feel like those two go well back to back in a way.
Yeah, no, it does. And if I was going to pick a third unusual one, it's going to sound really weird, but one track I've always would love to have heard done really well was the track Picasso, one of the
yeah. That never really made it to anything.
Well, I think it was sorry to I think it was part of either maybe both of these, the Tormato or Paris sessions, and then John reworked it in demo form in the 80s and for his musical, which he actually did a test of several months ago, I think, called Chagall. So yeah, would it have sounded similar to how it's like on the Tormato bonus tracks?
I don't know. I have no idea. I just remember when I got the Tormato, I don't have Kevin's collection of versions of Tormato, but I've got a few of them. Kevin is renowned for having, I think, about 128 different versions of Tormato.
Yeah.
I've got 3, I think. But the special edition remastered one does have the tracks on it, and that one just always struck me as a particularly beautiful John-like melody. And I always sort of thought to myself, that would have been a lovely track to have heard worked up in the Yes way. I think that would have been quite stunning.
Interesting. Absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
I'll read a couple comments and then get to our next question. So Robert Nasir says, thank you, Stephen, Dan, and Oliver, and a huge shout out to all the Yes fans worldwide. It was such a delight to see From a Page released, and I added it to my Yes collection. Seeing Oliver live with Yes in Michigan was great, but I'm so glad that his time with Yes is documented with a studio release. And earlier here, Total Master Tane said the Westboro show was like trying to see what the comment was. I think saying that the Westboro show was legendary or something was incredible. Yeah. So later this year in October, you're part of the Summer's End Festival, a progressive rock festival where I read that you'll be playing music from a Page as well as Ravens and Lullabies, and we're very excited about that idea. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to do From a Page live just before lockdown. It's a bit of an odd shout to do, but we were probably one of the first artists to actually cancel a show because of lockdown, because we could just see what was coming. Because you can normally tell with ticket sales, they have a little peak at the beginning, and then they go, and then they climb towards the end of the show. But we were just noticing with everybody's shows, everybody was saying shows are really struggling. They're not getting that extra bit that was coming. And so the show got pulled that I was going to do, where I was going to play it for the first time. And it was absolutely the right decision, because within I think 3 weeks of that, everything went into the hard lockdown in the UK. And so everything got cancelled. So we made the right choice. But I'm working on a new record. It's called Anam Cara, which is hopefully coming out towards the end of the year as well.
Yeah.
I got approached by Stephen Lamb, who promoted the Ravens and Lullabies tour, and he said, "Would you come and play the headline slot again?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." I said, "But haven't I just done it?" He said, "That was 10 years ago." I was like, "Oh, blimey, okay." 10 years ago, I did it with Gordon, and then he said, "Would you come again?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, what could you do that would be, make it a special show?" And I said, "Well, I can play some music from the new record and stuff." But I said, "We could do the From a Page thing again." And he said, "Oh, that would be great." And so the band that I've got Scott Hyam on drums, who I've worked with for a long time. I got Hayley Griffiths, who's a wonderful singer, who's
Yeah.
going to, and I've got Oliver Day, the guitarist from the Fragile Yes tribute band,
Mm-hmm.
who I've known Oliver for a long time, and he plays on they all play on the Anam Cara record. And I all said to them, "Do you want to do this?" And they were like, "Yes, please." And so, yeah, so I'm just sorting out the bass player at the moment, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. It's yes, it's a lot to learn, and I've never played it before. Well, I haven't played it since we did the backing tracks in the studio originally, because we played all the backing tracks live in the studio. Because what we did, Alan would listen to a click, and then we would listen to Alan. So
Oh, wow.
rather than doing it the way that we all tend to do it in studios, which is everybody works to a click track, we would actually all learn the piece, the backing track, a bit like the old Beatles days of trying to get it all onto one track and get a good take, and then you would build on that one take. So we did it a bit like that. And obviously it was all multi-tracked because we have that advantage now. But it meant that when we were all playing that track, we were all looking at each other and feeding off of each other and speeding up and slowing down with Alan naturally, rather than doing pretend speed ups and slow downs.
Yeah,
So
more organic and just natural. I love that. I can't wait to hear this live. I'd love to hear that. Is it going to be
yeah,
recorded or anything or a DVD?
do you know what? I'll sort of say, I'd love to, or I hope not, depending on how well the show goes. That's a really tricky thing though when you do a live show. I mean, if I think of something like live from Leon, because we'd done so many shows, when it got to recording the show, it's like, oh yeah, great, record the show, because we knew what we were doing. When you're doing a one-off show or a small tour, you haven't had months and months and months of refining and getting it just right and getting everything really under your fingers. You're still sort of slightly living a bit dangerously as you do the show.
Yeah.
I mean, as a musician, you know all this anyway, but you get that feeling, and that really adds to the adrenaline and the excitement of doing a show, and the audience feed off of that. And I did a show on the Ravens tour where I came off stage and I looked at the band and I just went, "That was incredible," and they all went, "Yeah, we felt it too." It was like, and I've done so many shows over the years in so many places. I said, but that is in my top 3 of all shows, just because of the atmosphere, the energy, and the way we played. Something about it was just beautiful. And then someone sent me a recording of it, and I listened to it, and it's like, oh, we made a mistake there. Oh, that didn't go as well as I thought it did. And the live Cold Light of Day recording was nothing like the feeling that everybody had coming away from the show, because
Wow.
it was that feeling that you get at an event. It's a bit like going to see a comedy show. When you go and see a comedy show, you're caught up in the moment. You'll laugh a lot more in the live place in the comedy show than you will watching a comedy show
Watching
on
it
TV.
back.
Oh yeah, like I've been kind of spoiled throughout college, going to lots of comedy shows on campus, and that atmosphere that it, like, after all that, I can't watch a comedy special on a screen. Like, it won't make me laugh much, if at all. So I totally get what you mean.
So it's a bit like that with live shows. You can do a live show and come away and go, "Oh, that was just great." And it's not, or you can do a live show where you said, "Well, we played everything absolutely perfectly," and everyone's bored stupid because it sounds just like the record. You know what I mean? You end up losing a little bit of it. There's more the danger. It's almost like the feeling of, yeah, we pulled that off. We actually, you know, we got everyone going. We went for that bit, and that really got everyone excited. That's what the live stuff is. So I'm always slightly wary of when I say, yeah, I'd love to record it, because it can sometimes spoil the magic of the memory of the event, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It does to me.
Absolutely. Totally
Yeah.
makes sense.
We
Yeah.
got a couple more comments. Kevin McIvergan says that the solo on To the Moment is amazing. And Dave Walkinson says definitely plug in the Revox because it may never be done again, Oliver. And also looking forward to October in Wales for a few days. Yeah, that festival will be in Chepstow in Wales, October 5th through 8th. You could go to summersend.co.uk for info on that. You mentioned Anam Cara, and what makes that album different from other projects that you've worked on? Like, what's different about this upcoming solo album?
And do you know about when it'll be out, Oliver?
Yeah, well, I'm in the middle of it's all in sort of mix at the moment, sort of post-production sort of mix sort of stuff where I'm going through everything that we've recorded, and I'm like my worst enemy. I sort of end up as composer and then producer, but I don't wear the producer hat while I'm writing. I don't try and do that. I try and write and go and arrange and pull the song together and get the excitement. And then I leave it for a bit and record all the bits. And then I come up back to it with a different hat on and go, yep, that's not good enough. And I cannot leave something if I don't think it's good enough. It really bugs me and annoys me. Even if it could just be a phrasing of a word, it will just annoy me. And I always remind myself that whatever I send to master now is going to be there and annoy me forever. So I've got to be happy with it. And my son and I often talk, and he says, well, why do you write? Why did you write that song? I said, well, because no one else had. So, and I like listening to it. And a lot of people, musicians go, oh, when I finish a record, the last thing I want to do is always listen to the record. It's like, no, I want to listen to it. I want to listen and enjoy all the work and actually go, I can't change this now. And that's exactly what I wanted.
I love that. Yeah.
So I'm in that moment at the moment of going through it. And it's like 9-10 songs, and I got through 4 or 5 of them, all sounding good, great, all went off to mix. And then I got to one song and it was like, I'm not quite happy with the vocal line there. And it was like, well, I was trying to work out what I didn't like about it. And then I saw this is a 10-minute song, and I suddenly realized actually it's everything about the vocal line I don't like. And it's like, and I think it was just because I'd lived with it for such a long time,
right,
that it was now actually less exciting than all the other stuff that I'd done that had raised the piece.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, well, my wife would always be the first one to go, it's lovely, leave it alone. But in my head, it would just nag at me. So I had to completely pull it apart and rewrite the entire vocal section. And suddenly then the middle bit, which had a vocal line, actually, that's not very good either. Or it's perfectly fine, but it can do more. And it wasn't about throwing in loads of more chords. It was actually making the melody join and take you on a journey. The old John Wetton thing that I was talking about right at the beginning of this, which is that it has to lead you and take you and tell the story and make sense. And you get to the end of the song and you hopefully go, wow, I want to hear that again, because there was so much to understand in the music. So I'm a bit of a nightmare like that, where I've been promising to send it off to mix for about 2 months now, but I keep going.
The balance is you got to be happy with it without making it a forever project. And that's the evil in there. The good evil. I mean,
it has a deadline, but by mid-July I have to have everything sent over for mixes and get it ready to play the management company. So that's where we are at the moment. But musically, it's sort of got a Celtic ring to it, because I love Celtic music, and I wanted to do so. Everybody keeps saying to me, what are you doing next? I said, I'm not sure. And they were like, well, I think you should do a big keyboard record, nothing but keyboards on it and loads of solos and all that. And I sort of thought, yeah, it'd be good fun, but I get a kick out of working with other musicians and the textures and what other musicians bring to a piece of music. And I'm a bit of a nightmare, because I'll write all their parts for them and send them to them. And it's a bit like vocal lines, you get it back and I want it exactly as I sent it. But then I always sort of think that I have in my head, I always have what I call my sort of 10 to 20% tolerance change, which is where people will do what they do naturally, right, and just elevate something to that higher level. It's like you'll give a drummer, you'll know this is a drummer, you'll say, I want you to do this, and I want to feel it sort of goes da 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 da, and you get it, and you'll go da 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 da, and then the producer will go, brilliant, I wouldn't have been able to do that. That's why I want you to do it.
Right.
It's those things that I love getting from the musicians. I sort of give them 70 to the 80% of the bread and butter work, as it was, and then the areas where they really shine is the areas where you're looking for what that musician brings to the piece of music. So I work a lot with people like that, and they generally keep coming back to work with me. So whatever I do, the way that I like working seems to resonate with them, because they always kind of say, when are you doing the next one? And so this record has got so many keyboard parts that I've just taken off that were all on there, because the whole ring was like loads of keyboards. And then I sort of get in touch where Troy Denockley's doing the whistles and Ilian pipes from Nightwish. He's doing all those on the record. So, you know, I took a load of keyboards off for him to put those parts in. He did amazing stuff. I've got a violinist friend, Robert McCung from the Telegy project, who's done all the violins on it. And again, I'll send in all the parts, and he will send, yeah, but a violinist would do this here at this point with a double stop. And it's like, brilliant. That's what you want the musicians to bring to it. Tell you what the instrument does that you as a keyboard player don't know or wouldn't write, you know. So they bring that to it. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff going on, and a great sax player doing some sax on it. And what else have I got on there? Obviously, Oliver Day's got loads of lap steel on there, because I love lap steel guitar. And it's got some classical guitars on there. We've got I even dug out an old harmonium, having to play a harmonium on one track, pedaling whilst trying to play, because you're pedaling it to get the bellows with the sound through. So there's even some of that on there. And
I love that. I actually have an 1887 pump organ with the two pedals. Yeah, and it's like running on a fucking treadmill. It's like, I can't believe I've never been so worn out. I'm a drummer, and I've never been so worn out playing an instrument than that thing.
Yeah. Well, we had it. It was in the guy whose studio I was doing some of the vocal recording in. He had it in between the two vocal session, soundproof rooms, in the hallway. So I said to him, "Does that work?" And he said, "Yeah, it does." What he said, I've said I've never recorded with it, but it does work. So I said, "Well, where do you play?" He said, "Oh no, it's a harmonium. You have to pedal it." And I was, "Oh, brilliant, okay." And he said, "Let me go and get a mic." And then we suddenly realized that we actually had no monitoring. We couldn't hear anything. So I just had the chords written down for all the parts I had to play. And he was through the glass going,
hopefully in time, right?
So he was listening to the music, counting me with a click. And I was having to pedal in time with the click so that you get the right resonance.
And enough air.
Yeah. So it was great fun. It was brilliant. But I just wanted to do an album where I could have loads of different textures. And my David Mark Pierce, that does a lot of my guitar stuff for me on previous records, so he's quite a rocky guitarist. So there's elements where he's on there. So we go from sort of like quite rocky sections to really delicate sections. I mean, Hayley's got a wonderful voice. She's one of the few vocalists I know that can sing like an angel and then rock it the next minute with a real throaty rock voice. So she's just perfect for what I needed to do. And Oliver, and has he's playing lute on a couple of records, mandolin in place. It's just lovely to be able to work with musicians that have this expertise in their area, so I could say to Oliver, well, I gave him a keyboard part, and he said technically that's not playable on a mandolin. And I sort of had flashbacks to when Dad used to write stuff, and trumpet players used to say to him, "You do realize we have to breathe as well." And Oliver said that's, and I said, "Oh well, if it's not playable, ignore me. Just do the bit you can." He said, "No. I reckon I can make it work, providing I use a tenor lute for the part of it and a mandolin." And so he's building it across two different instruments to try and get the melody. And it was just that sort of wonderful. Just the ability of these people to come and enhance the music and just make it. And I'm really excited about this project. And I know every musician will come on to being interviewed will go, "Oh, this record's the best thing I've done most." But I genuinely have a real affinity with this record. It's just been such a great thing to work on. And I want to get it finished because I want to hear it. Because I
can't wait to hear it. Yeah. Will you tour it?
I'd like to. If we can find a way of doing it, I would love to. I mean, we'll do a few tracks at the Summer's End Festival, but to tour it properly, I would need quite a few more musicians to do it.
Yeah.
To do it justice, because there's so many different instruments on it in places. You'd need to really do it properly. But I would, never say never. I'd love to.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just read one more comment real quick. Harry Whitley says, "Ridiculously excited to be joining your dad at the John Wetton Memorial gig. Loved your playing. I remember watching a video of you demonstrating all the Yes keyboard players' styles. Loved it. I actually have the link handy, which I'll paste at tradingboundaries.com/concert, and that's August 3rd. People can watch the stream of that. But yeah, I remember that instructional vid that you did, Oliver, where you compared how you played your dad's bits and Tony K's
Yeah,
keyboard
I remember
bits,
that.
and it's a very great video.
Yeah, that was good fun doing that. That was recorded in, I think that was recorded in Rouen, in France, which was the day before the Live from Lyon show, because
Right.
Oh,
that show was all, it was, at the time it was pioneering. The whole show was recorded in 3D. They'd invented this new, before, I mean, bear in mind this is 12 years ago. This was, they'd invented a way of watching 3D things without actually having to have the glasses, which was
wow.
at the time was really unusual. But it had to be filmed in a certain way, but they could only, there was only two cameras, so they could only film two people at any one time. So we were going to record Rouen and then Lyon, and then have the whole thing done as a 3D movie,
How
which was
interesting.
which was the plan at the time. And so all these little incidental stuff was filmed. I actually have a copy of some of the little documentary in 3D, and you have to wear a special pair of mirrored glasses to see it all work in 3D. I've got that sort of hidden somewhere. But that was quite. I remember doing that at the time and thinking that so that little bit of keyboard instruction was videoed for that, and I remember doing it at the time thinking this is really weird. It's sort of a nostalgia tour, and they're still keen to experiment and try something new and just do something different and see if it works or not. And I always remember Chris would come up to me because Chris's wife Scotty and I used to go shopping all the time because I didn't drink and go to bars and stuff. I would go out and buy clothes for my wife and buy Lego for my son. And I'd often going out and buying shirts and stuff. And Chris would just come to me every now and then and say, I can still remember to this day walking up to me with two shirts on a hanger going, which one for the video? Which one's going to work best in 3D?
That's so funny.
Oh, good day.
Probably one of the most important questions of this interview. Hang on to something, folks. This could be earth shattering. And you and Steve touched on this a little bit before we went live. But what's your status with keeping up with the Frasier revival?
Oh, well, I haven't.
Well, do you keep up with like the news that comes out about it, or do you sort of wait until it comes out and see what like?
Do you know what? It's a weird one because I have such I just love the Frasier series so much. It's like one of my favorite things. And I showed you earlier on, I have it on my phone at the moment, working my way through all the episodes again for I don't know how many times I've gone through the whole thing. I can't count, but so many times I it's almost like a familiar thing. When I was on tour, because you're often in different countries and you don't recognize the TV channels or the TV shows or everything, watching Frasier was always something that made me feel like I was at home, like a lot of the British I would do. So whenever I would go to a hotel room, first thing I would do was put the laptop up and put a Frasier on or something that just made it feel like home. Yeah. And that was what it was. So Frasier has a real thing for me, which is like I just really enjoy the show, really loved it. So when they said they were doing a reboot, it was like, okay, I watched the conversation they all had where they did a lockdown thing where they all talked about their memories of the show.
Right.
And then it sort of came out that they were going to do this sort of new version. And I was sort of like, oh, how are they going to do that without,
it's like a 20 years later thing with Kelsey Grammer and some new cast members.
Yeah. And then when I found out that a lot of the older cast probably weren't going to be in it, that was like I'm not sure about that because they became a real ensemble cast, a bit like Cheers did. Cheers originally started, it was around Sam and Diane, but eventually, it very quickly became an ensemble piece where every character really had their own personality. And the same happened with Frasier very quickly. And so when they said there was doing this new one, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll wait and see. And then they announced Nicholas Lyndhurst doing one of the roles. And he's a very well-known British actor from doing a TV show called Only Fools and Horses. And a little bit like we were talking earlier on when we were talking about Hugh Laurie in House in America. He's so well known for House.
Yeah. And
know him.
Veep, actually, too. His work.
Oh,
Are
right,
you familiar with the show Veep?
I've seen it once or twice.
Yeah, he's in like 1 or 2 seasons at the most, but it was sort of that same thing, American accent, impeccable.
yeah.
And yeah.
But
So.
I know him from when I was in my early formative days of going out and playing in blues bands. He used to appear on a show in England called A Bit of Fry and Laurie with Stephen Fry, and they used to do these ridiculous sketch shows.
I've seen that.
And he just used to. That's how I remember Hugh Laurie. And so when I see him doing films and more serious stuff, I sort of think, yes, but you're still the person that falls over in the trench in Blackadder. And so to me, a bit like Tormato, it's the formative memory I have of these people in roles that I loved. Jeeves and Wooster, and I'm a big English lit fan. So Fry and Laurie, when they played Jeeves and Wooster, was amazing for me. So it's a little bit the same when we get to Frasier and when you talk about Nicholas Lyndhurst doing it, because Nicholas Lyndhurst is Rodney from Only Fools and Horses. So anyone from England watching this will go, Rodney is going to be in Frasier. How does that work? So you get that sort of, but then you sort of immediately go, well, that won't work. And then you suddenly go, well, actually, why won't it work? There's a lot of infinitely cleverer people than me out there that have looked into this show and worked out the best way of doing it. So
see, I think you and I are on the same page with that, Oliver, because there's that curious nostalgia that you can't help but want to know what is up with that. But at the same time, don't spoil what's already been done that's great and is fine the way it is.
Yeah.
It's almost like you don't want to spoil what was so good. Just maybe leave it there.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that revivals can be hit and miss depending on the execution. But having seen, I actually went to a live taping of the first episode of this Frasier revival, and I won't spoil anything because I'm pretty sure I'm not allowed to say much. But I think that, well, just based on that first taping, I think the new cast members do a good job of compensating for the lack of the presence of the rest of the ensemble who aren't back. So I'm very curious to see what the reaction will be once the whole season airs. I'm actually quite excited and hopeful about it.
I think what was really good about Frasier was that they got the tone of the show right from day one.
Yeah.
It had the
chemistry.
Blackout screen. Yeah, the chemistry was brilliant. The blackout screen with the phrase coming in and out, the radio show, everything was right from day one.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a lot of comedies where it sort of slowly evolves into the show that it becomes known for. And I always sort of really enjoyed that about Frasier. You sort of, it feels like a real thing. It doesn't feel like it changed to meet a demographic or something. It just was the cleverly written show that was just really, really good.
Absolutely.
And I was watching it earlier on today just while I was making a cup of coffee, because I do that because I don't get enough time to sit down and just sit and watch television. I never get time to sit and watch it unless I'm doing music for something where someone's asked me to do something to film, and I obviously then spend a lot of time watching stuff. But that's why I have everything on my phone. It's like I'll make a cup of coffee, I'll get 5 minutes, so I'll put 5 minutes of Frasier on. Yeah. I'm going to empty the recycling, so I'll put it on in my pocket and listen to it. It's that sort of thing. It's one of those things that I just love. And because I spend so much time in music, my first choice nowadays often isn't just to go and put some music on. It's to actually, because I think as I've got older and become more and more involved in music, and you do more and more production and you do more and more writing and analyzing and shows where you have to pull music together, the music that I really enjoy is the music I really listened to when I was a kid before I started to pull everything to pieces. So when I listen to something new, my son says, listen to this. I'm like, yeah, well, he's doing that there, and that wasn't great. And I can find myself being analytical because it's new, because that's who I've become. But if I listen to something like Who Do We Think We Are by Deep Purple, it's Who Do We Think We Are by Deep Purple. I don't pull it apart because it was at a period of my life where I first heard it, where it was just an entity altogether.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I have a bit of that. So, but Frasier is a bit like that. It's the same sort of thing. I just listen to it as a thing. I know it so well. I just really love it. So I'm the same as you. I have a little bit of that trepidation of, oh, please don't spoil it.
Right.
bit like they
Right.
did with Friends when they did Joey series straight after, which sort of didn't manage to work. I don't know how that's viewed in America. I know they only ever did 2 series of the second series, never really.
Yeah, it's kind of forgotten. I don't think you can really watch it anywhere. So it's yeah, people don't really remember the Joey series, and those who do don't have kind of a low opinion of it, I think. So
I
yeah.
have it on DVD if that's any help.
Okay.
Only series one. I don't have series two. I never found series two, but I do have series one on DVD. But
Right.
it's that same sort of thing. It was it. I mean, yeah, I enjoy it. Bits of it made me laugh, but it did have that downside of actually trying to follow one of the most successful things of all time. And so Frasier has that same sort of thing. But then they did it with Cheers. Who would have said it would have worked after Cheers? Everybody would
Yeah.
have said, "What a dreadful idea!
Yeah.
Why do that? Why not pick
Yeah.
normal? Pick, you know."
Yeah, I think Frasier is a prime example of a spin-off that surpasses the thing it spun off from, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
that doesn't
And it
happen-
goes
that
back
doesn't
to what you
happen.
were saying, Oliver, the whole chemistry of it and how right they had it from the beginning.
Yeah. Have you said? I know we can keep doing this for hours, and everybody else watching this is probably long left. But there's a somebody told me, and I did find it. There's a hidden Frasier episode in an episode of Wings. Do you remember?
Oh
when
yeah, I actually
Oh yeah.
I think you told us about it, and
No,
I
okay,
actually
that's not-
I actually finally watched it, and yeah, it came out toward the end of Cheers, I think, like maybe a year before Cheers ended. So even though it was during the Cheers timeline, since it only had Frasier and Lilith, it kind of feels like a Frasier episode. But Frasier in that Wings episode felt so different from how I view him in those other shows. It was kind of
Yeah,
strange.
yeah, it was great. I remember finding it and thinking, "Oh, brilliant!" You know.
Yeah.
There's
It-
another little hidden one which I've since discovered. There is an episode of, I don't know if you remember this one, Caroline in the City, which was another sitcom around the time.
mm.
And that one, at the end of it, there is a Niles and Daphne skit at the
Oh
end of it.
wow. I'm
Yeah,
not
I watched
familiar
the
with that.
clip of it, but not the episode. I haven't seen that show. I've seen the first few episodes of Wings, and I was like, I'm not so sure about this. But having watched the episode with Frasier and Lilith, and seeing kind of where the actual cast of Wings is at that point in that season, it kind of makes me want to reevaluate and be like, okay, maybe Wings is worth a full
Yeah,
watch. I'll give
I'll
it
have to
another shot.
try and find those again. But yeah, the Caroline in the City one that is actually they're in the apartment. So it actually jumps back into a little bit of
Right.
Frasier, and then Niles actually, or David Hyde
Hyde Pierce.
Hyde Pierce. Sorry, my guitarist is David Mark Pierce. I've only just really put those two together. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I could see David Hyde Pierce showing up to your studio going, okay, now what am I supposed to be doing here?
What am I doing here? But
Called
he,
the wrong guy.
but I remember thinking that, and then David Hyde Pierce actually plays another part in Caroline in the City. It's all around that same time.
Oh.
It's that wonderful sitcom crossover thing that they sort of started to do, where Mad About You came into Friends.
Friends, yeah.
Interesting. So just quick Wings note, Steve, especially for you, since you're really not that familiar. I loved that show I forgot the actor's name who played Lloyd, the mechanic, who was also the Sandman in one of the Spider-Man movies. What's his name?
Oh, Thomas Hayden Church?
Yeah, I loved his character, and Tony Shalhoub playing the crazy taxi driver.
Oh
that no
yeah,
one
and he
could
plays a different character in an episode of Frasier. Isn't that strange?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
liked those were my two favorite characters, and they weren't even the main characters.
There's a few weird ones like that. John Mahoney was in an episode of Cheers,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
so was
and yeah, and the actress who played Roz, I think, also played a
Terry,
different
yeah,
character.
she was in it as well. Yeah,
Oh, I don't remember that. How weird.
yeah, she was a journalist, I think. God, everybody,
Yeah,
we've got to talk 3 minutes of Yes and about an hour and a half of American sitcoms.
yeah,
We have more questions, but we're going to save them for another interview. We want to be respectful of your time. We know it's late there. And folks, if you joined us late, rewind the archive, watch from the beginning. You'll love the beginning because my mic wasn't connected, so you don't have to put up with my nonsense. But Oliver, we loved having you on, hearing stories from Yes. a Yes member, great solo artist, work with Gordon Giltrap, Steve Howe, the Strawbs, and a lot of people don't know this, the actual keyboard player from Songs from Songus and the Full Circle tour, playing under the stage while Rick mimed everything. Wait, what? Oliver,
Yeah,
thanks for making
that's a
time. Really
joke.
appreciate it. And I'll send you a picture of the organ I told you about.
Yes, please, yeah, please do.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you've heard of the brand. Supposedly, it did win some awards back then or something, and it is an English pump organ. But stay on the line with us, folks. Thanks for following what we do here on Yesshift, where you can follow us on Facebook.com/Yesshift, Anchor.fm/Yesshift, YouTube.com/@Yesshift, and you can write us at YessShiftPodcast@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody. See you again soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.